Hello everyone, welcome back to the True Story channel, and thank you sincerely for spending a few moments of your day here with us. Stories shared on this channel are not just about events that happened, but about the quiet lessons hidden inside ordinary moments of life. Today's story begins with something small, something that might look harmless from the outside, a simple joke at a family dinner. But sometimes, the quietest moments reveal the deepest truths about people, dignity, and the choices we make when someone we love is hurt. If you stay with this story until the end, I'm certain it will help us understand a little more about human nature, about family, and about the quiet courage it sometimes takes to protect the people who matter most. For most of my life, I believed that endurance meant maturity. I thought that if you stayed calm when something uncomfortable happened, you were the stronger person in the room. If you smiled at the right time, softened the tension, or quietly redirected a conversation, you were the one keeping peace. That belief followed me for years, shaped by the rhythm of family dinners at my parents' house in the quiet suburbs outside Portland. The house itself seemed unchanged by time. The large oak dining table still stood at the center of the room, polished smooth from decades of use. Above it hung the same warm chandelier that cast a soft golden glow across the plates my mother arranged with careful precision. The air smelled of rosemary chicken and freshly baked bread, the kind of comforting scent that makes a home feel steady and familiar. Beneath the window, the old radiator hummed softly, its metallic rhythm blending into the calm of an ordinary evening. That night began like so many others. My daughter Sophie sat between my husband Daniel and me, her small shoulders slightly tucked in the way she did when she was somewhere unfamiliar. Sophie was 8 years old, thoughtful and observant, the kind of child who noticed things adults often missed. Behind her right ear rested a small, pale pink hearing aid, delicate enough that it almost disappeared against her hair unless the light caught it just right. We had gotten it only 7 months earlier after a long stretch of doctor visits, hearing tests, insurance calls, and paperwork that seemed endless at the time. Through all of it, Sophie never complained. She only asked one question the night we first brought it home: whether she would still be able to hear the birds outside in the morning. I remember promising her that she would, and as the chandelier light reflected softly off that tiny device during dinner, I believed everything was perfectly fine. Until my sister Jessica leaned forward, noticed it, and said something that quietly changed the entire room. Have you ever watched a room change in a single moment so quietly that no one raises their voice, yet everyone feels the shift? That was the moment my sister noticed the small device behind Sophie's ear. The dinner had been calm until then, the kind of comfortable family evening where conversations drift easily from one topic to another. Plates were passing across the table, forks lightly tapping porcelain, the smell of roasted potatoes mixing with the warm scent of rosemary chicken. Then Jessica leaned forward slightly, narrowing her eyes as if she had just spotted something curious. "Oh wow, wait a second," she said with a half smile that already made my stomach tighten. "Is that one of those little Bluetooth things? Or are we upgrading kids to cyborgs now?" The words floated into the air like something tossed carelessly, but they didn't disappear. A few uneasy laughs rippled around the table, the kind people offer when they aren't sure whether laughter is appropriate. My mother inhaled quietly. My father paused with his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. Sophie lifted her hand and touched the hearing aid behind her ear. She didn't say anything at first. Her fingers rested there gently, as if she needed to reassure herself that the device was still there, still part of her. Daniel spoke before the silence stretched too far. "It's a hearing aid," he said evenly. Jessica shrugged, as though the explanation made the moment lighter instead of heavier. "Relax," she replied with a small laugh. "I'm kidding. I just didn't expect her to look so upgraded." That word landed wrong. I felt it immediately, a tightening in my chest that I recognized from years of small moments like this at the same table. It was the moment where a decision forms quietly inside you. Do you speak and risk turning an awkward moment into conflict? Or do you let the comment drift away, pretending it never mattered? Before I could answer that question for myself, my father cleared his throat. "It's just a joke," he said calmly. "Lighten up." Those words had always been the unspoken rule of our family. Don't stretch a moment into an argument. Don't make dinner uncomfortable. I looked at Sophie. She wasn't crying, but something in her posture had changed. Her shoulders folded inward, her eyes lowering to the table as if she were trying to make herself smaller. And suddenly, I recognized the gesture with painful clarity. I had done the exact same thing when I was her age. "Silence," I told myself. "Just let it pass." But then Sophie spoke in a voice so soft it barely crossed the table. "It helps me hear better." No one answered. My mother asked about school. Jessica poured more wine. My father resumed cutting his chicken. The conversation tried to move forward, fragile and uneven. And before I could decide what to do next, Daniel slowly pushed back his chair and stood. Sometimes, the most powerful moment in a room is not when someone shouts, but when someone quietly refuses to pretend everything is fine. Daniel's chair moved back from the table with a soft scrape against the floor, and the sound cut through the fragile conversation like a blade through thin glass. For a second, no one spoke. He didn't rush. He didn't look angry. He simply placed his napkin beside his plate with deliberate care and stood up. At first, I assumed he was stepping away to clear his head. That would have fit the pattern we all knew: leave the table, let the tension dissolve, return when things felt normal again. But Daniel didn't walk toward the kitchen. He moved calmly through the hallway and opened the front door. Cool night air slipped into the house, brushing against the warmth of the dining room like a quiet interruption. Everyone looked up. Even Jessica stopped mid-sentence. Daniel turned back toward the table and spoke with a calm certainty that made the room feel suddenly smaller. "I think we're done here tonight." No anger, no raised voice, just a sentence placed exactly where it needed to be. My father reacted first, leaning forward with a frown. "Don't be ridiculous," he said sharply. Jessica pushed her chair back, disbelief spreading across her face. "Seriously, you're overreacting," she replied. Daniel didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. Instead, he walked toward the coat rack near the hallway. He lifted Jessica's jacket from its hook and held it out to her. The gesture was polite, almost quiet, but unmistakable. Jessica stared at him for a moment before grabbing the coat. "Unbelievable," she muttered under her breath. My father shook his head, murmuring something about disrespect and unnecessary drama. My mother avoided my eyes entirely, as though eye contact might force her to acknowledge what had just happened. Within minutes, the hallway filled with the small sounds of departure shoes against the floor, a door opening, the faint rustle of fabric. When the door finally closed behind them, it didn't slam. It clicked softly into place, leaving the house wrapped in a sudden stillness. I turned back toward the dining table. Sophie was watching us, her eyes wide and uncertain. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked quietly. The question landed harder than any argument could have. I knelt beside her chair and gently shook my head. "No, sweetheart," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "You didn't do anything wrong." Daniel rested his hand lightly on my shoulder, not as a shield, but as reassurance. That night, I lay awake long after the house had gone silent, staring into the dark and knowing the morning would bring consequences. And when the first light of dawn finally touched the window, I saw something waiting outside my father's car, parked in the driveway. What would you do if someone tried to buy your silence with money? The question formed in my mind the moment I saw my father's car waiting in the driveway the next morning. The sky was still pale with early light, the neighborhood quiet, yet the sight of that familiar car carried a weight I couldn't ignore. My father stepped inside without the usual greetings, holding a plain white envelope in his hand, like it contained the final word on what had happened the night before. His voice was calm, controlled, the same tone he always used when he believed he was being reasonable. "I've been thinking," he said slowly. "If this is how things are going to be, if I'm going to be thrown out of my own daughter's house over nothing." He set the envelope on the kitchen counter between us. Inside were printed paper's records of the money he had contributed towards Sophie's hearing aid months earlier. At the time, it had felt generous, something we had genuinely appreciated. But now the envelope sat there, like a quiet reminder that generosity sometimes arrives with expectations. He looked directly at me. "I won't be funding any future upgrades," he said. "Not if every joke turns into drama." For a moment the room was silent. Daniel didn't even glance at the envelope. "We won't need it," he replied calmly. My father blinked in surprise. Daniel explained that the insurance appeal had already been approved and that a hearing foundation grant had come through the week before. The refund would cover everything. I watched the realization settle on my father's face as the leverage he believed he held quietly disappeared. Daniel's voice softened, but remained firm. "This isn't about money. It's about whether our daughter feels safe in a room." My father turned toward me, waiting for the familiar response, the one where I smoothed the tension and made peace. But something inside me had changed. "We're not trading her dignity for family dinners," I said. He left a few minutes later, the envelope still on the counter. Thank you for listening. And if you stay with this story, what happens next may reveal even more about the quiet ways families change.